Bees are performing one of nature's most incredible GPS systems right now. When they find a good food source, they return to their hive and perform a waggle dance, a series of movements that communicate the exact direction and distance to nectar, pollen, or water relative to the sun. This isn't a random jiggle. It's precise navigation that lets other foragers know exactly where to fly. Animals and flowers have developed secret languages using colors, scents, sounds, and movements to communicate vital survival information. And some of them would make any spy jealous. Picture this. You're standing in a garden where every bloom is broadcasting messages invisible to your eyes, where each flower is timing its chemical announcements with the precision of a Swiss watch, and where the air itself carries urgent warnings between plants. This is the hidden communication network that's been operating around you your entire life. Colors and patterns create visual languages more complex than any human billboard. When a flower gets pollinated, many species actually change their color or pattern to signal already visited to other pollinators, like flipping a sign from open to closed. This prevents wasted energy for both the insect and the plant. That bright yellow center of a daisy? It's a landing strip telling bees exactly where to touch down. The dark lines radiating from the center of a pansy are called nectar guides, literal roadmaps pointing insects toward the sweet reward inside. But the most incredible part is what you can't see. Many flowers have patterns that are completely invisible to human eyes but blazing bright under ultraviolet light. To a bee, a garden looks like an airport at night, with every flower displaying glowing runway lights and directional arrows. Butterflies take this visual communication even further. Their wing patterns aren't just beautiful, they're actually complex identification cards readable by other butterflies. Those eye spots on a peacock butterfly's wings are designed to startle predators, buying precious seconds for escape. Here's where it gets truly wild. Some flowers can even detect the electrical charge that builds up on a bee's fuzzy body during flight. When that charged bee lands on a flower, it triggers a color change that can last for minutes, essentially putting up a recently visited sign for the next pollinator. The flower is reading the bee's electrical signature and responding with a visual message that other insects can interpret from several feet away. But the most fascinating conversations happen through scents, invisible messages floating through the air that carry incredibly specific information. When a rose releases its perfume at exactly 7 p.m. each evening, it's not trying to smell pretty for you. It's broadcasting a chemical dinner bell to nocturnal moths, telling them fresh nectar available now in a language older than words. These scent signals are so precise they make our text messages look clumsy. A flower can release different chemical combinations to attract different pollinators at different times of day. Morning glory flowers pump out one scent cocktail at dawn for early rising bees, then switch to a completely different chemical blend by afternoon to call in butterflies. It's like having a restaurant that changes its entire menu every few hours to attract different customers. Animals have learned to read these airborne messages with incredible accuracy. A bee can detect and follow a flower's scent trail from over a mile away, navigating through forests and around buildings by following an invisible chemical highway. But here's where it gets really wild. Some flowers actually eavesdrop on the chemical conversations between insects. When a caterpillar starts munching on a plant's leaves, the damaged plant releases alarm chemicals into the air. Nearby flowers detect these distress signals and immediately ramp up production of bitter-tasting compounds in their own leaves, essentially preparing for an attack that hasn't happened yet. They're reading the chemical panic button of their neighbor and responding with their own defensive chemistry. The most incredible part? Some orchids have learned to perfectly mimic the pheromones that female wasps use to attract mates. Male wasps follow what they think is a love letter through the air, only to find themselves face-to-face with a flower that's tricked them into becoming an unpaid delivery service. Think about the last time you walked past a flower and caught a whiff of its scent. You weren't just smelling something pretty. You were intercepting a targeted chemical message meant for a specific pollinator, timed to the exact hour when that insect would be most receptive. You were eavesdropping on a conversation millions of years in the making. So which of these secret communication methods surprised you most? The bees' electrical charge triggering color changes, or flowers eavesdropping on their neighbors' chemical panic signals? Drop your answer in the comments below. Now let's dive into the sounds and movements that make up nature's most dramatic conversations. Beyond the silent signals of scent and sight, there's an entire acoustic world buzzing around you that you've probably never noticed. Black-capped chickadees have developed a sophisticated system of alarm calls that conveys information about the size of potential predators. When these birds encounter a small predator, they produce a high-pitched seat call. For larger threats, they switch to a louder chickadee call, each one calibrated to the danger level. The birds mount a more vigorous mobbing response when they hear a small predator alarm call. More birds get involved, they approach closer to the threat, and they keep up the defense for a longer period of time. These tiny birds have essentially developed different warning sounds for different-sized dangers, like having separate emergency alert systems built into their voices. But the audio conversations don't stop with birds. Some flowers can actually hear bees coming. Research shows flowers exposed to the sound of a flying bee respond by producing sweeter nectar within minutes, potentially increasing the chances of pollination. The flowers vibrate mechanically in response to these sounds, suggesting they function as auditory sensory organs. Both the vibration and the nectar response are frequency-specific. The flowers respond to pollinator sounds but ignore higher frequency noise. It's like having a doorbell that only rings for the delivery person you actually want to see. Fairy wrens take this listening even further. They can learn unfamiliar alarm calls from other bird species without ever seeing the bird that made the call or the predator that provoked it. Instead, they recognize new alarm calls by listening for unfamiliar sounds within a chorus of familiar ones. These birds are essentially learning new languages just by eavesdropping on conversations they've never been part of, building a multilingual warning system that spans multiple species. The waggle dance is far more sophisticated than scientists originally thought. When followers were scarce, dancers became less precise in their directional and distance communication, even if the dance floor was crowded with young bees that do not follow dances. Dancers use simple social cues, such as tactile contacts, to sense follower availability, making waggle dancing not a one-way signal, but a socially responsive behavior shaped by feedback from followers. Dance-following bees don't simply follow a blind vector instruction, they integrate it with a cognitive map of their surroundings built during earlier exploratory flights, allowing them to form expectations and navigate more efficiently. When a bee receives directions through the dance, it's not just following GPS coordinates. It's combining that information with its own mental map of landmarks, roads, and familiar territories. Flowers have their own movement languages that guide pollinators with remarkable precision. Some flowers can detect the approach of a flying bee and actually adjust their position to make landing easier. The petals of certain species will shift slightly when they sense the air currents from approaching wings, creating a more stable platform for touchdown. Many species will change the angle of their stamens and pistils throughout the day, positioning their reproductive parts differently for morning versus afternoon visitors. It's like having adjustable furniture that reconfigures itself based on who's expected to arrive. These movements aren't random. They're timed conversations between flower and pollinator, written in the language of position and angle rather than color or scent. These communication systems exist because survival depends on connection. Nearly 80% of Amazonian tree species rely on animals for both pollination and seed dispersal, creating an interconnected web where every bee dance, every color change, and every chemical signal serves the ultimate goal of survival and reproduction. Your backyard is a bustling city where every resident speaks multiple languages. The morning glory that opens at dawn isn't just beautiful, it's broadcasting a breakfast invitation to early rising pollinators in a chemical language they've been fluent in for millions of years. When that same flower closes by afternoon and switches its scent profile, it's essentially changing the channel to attract a completely different audience of butterflies and afternoon visitors. When one plant is attacked, nearby plants detect the chemical distress signals and adjust their own defenses. This underground network of fungal connections allows plants across entire forests to share nutrients, send warnings, and coordinate responses to threats, creating a kind of community resilience where the ecosystem as a whole becomes stronger than any single organism could be alone. But here's what will blow your mind. Right now, as you're reading this, millions of these conversations are happening within 100 feet of where you sit. Every garden, every park, every wild space around you is humming with these ancient languages that have been perfecting themselves for over 130 million years. The flower on your windowsill isn't just sitting there looking pretty, it's actively broadcasting chemical signals, adjusting its electrical field, and timing its scent releases with the precision of a master strategist. You can start witnessing these conversations right now. Watch how different flowers in your neighborhood open and close at different times. They're scheduling their chemical broadcasts to avoid interference. Notice how bees seem to prefer certain flowers over others that look identical to you. They're reading ultraviolet patterns and electrical signatures you can't see. Pay attention to which plants grow near each other. They might be sharing resources through underground networks, having chemical conversations beneath your feet. Once you start noticing, you realize you're not just observing nature when you step outside. You're witnessing the most sophisticated communication network on Earth, one that built the world you live in. And the most incredible part? You've been invited into this conversation every time you've ever stopped to smell a flower or watched a bee at work. Now it's your turn to become a nature detective. This week, spend just 5 minutes each day observing the flowers and plants around you with fresh eyes. Look for the patterns we've discussed. Notice which flowers are open in the morning versus afternoon. Watch how bees move from bloom to bloom, and see if you can spot any color changes or timing patterns. Take photos if you can, and share what you discover in the comments. Which communication signals did you notice that you'd never seen before? Your observations could reveal communication patterns that scientists are still discovering. The more we understand these ancient languages, the better we can protect the incredible networks that sustain life on Earth. Subscribe for more nature secrets and check out how trees talk to each other next.